For 10,000 years, the Aboriginal people of Tasmania lived peacefully, isolated from the rest of the world. In 1803, British colonists started to settle in Australia, and then 73 years later, the last Tasmanian would go on to die. This would complete the wipeout of native Tasmanians, known as the Tasmanian Genocide. The Tasmanian Genocide, also referred to as the Black War, occurred through the mid-1820s and ended in 1832. The people involved in the genocide were the native Aboriginals of Tasmania and the British colonists. The genocide occurred in Tasmania, also known as Van Diemen's Land. The conflict sparked in 1803, when the British started to settle into Tasmania. Then, in September 1803, a small military outpost was established in Risdon on the Derwent River. The establishment of the outpost would go on to cause 5 months of bloody fighting between the British and the native Aboriginal clans, which really sparked the beginning of the genocide. The colonists started to discriminate the Tasmanians, as they began to invade Tasmania and force them off their land. However, the native clans began to fight a war of resistance. However, these attacks did not occur as often, as from 1803 to 1824, there had only been a recorded 20 Aboriginal attacks. As well as this, the colonizer population consisted mostly of men, so indigenous women would be captured and forced to live a life of physical and sexual servitude. The British kept gaining more land, and as the natives had to keep fighting harder. The attacks became more intense, and so did the revenge attacks of the frontiermen. George Arthur was appointed as governor in 1824, right as tensions between the two groups became even more intense than before. Arthur constructed military posts on the borders of the British territory to help prevent Aboriginals from entering their area, and to stop conflict between the two groups. In 1828, Arthur sent a letter to colonial officials in London stating that we are undoubtedly the first aggressors and the desperate character amongst the prisoner population who have from time to time absconded into the woods, have no doubt committed the greatest outrages upon the natives, and these ignorant beings, incapable of discrimination, are now filled with enmity and revenge against the whole body of white inhabitants. In this quote, Arthur does recognize what the colonists have done to the Aboriginals, and in later years tries to heal this bond. Even with Arthur's goal to have a good relationship with Aboriginals, on November 1st, 1829, Arthur declared martial law against the Aboriginals, stating that it was allowed to kill any locals on sight. Historian and author James Boyce proclaimed that any Aboriginal could now be legally killed for doing no more than crossing an unmarked border that the government did not even bother to define. The natives were seen as an enemy to the king, and this law would continue on for 3 more years. Along with this, patrol teams, as seen in the image here, were created to help enforce order among the natives. They were led by police officers and composed of criminals. These teams chased down any Tasmanians and had authority to kill them immediately. Along with this, the stage of dehumanization and genocide had occurred, with prices for killing the Tasmanian Aboriginals, £5 for an adult and £2 for a child. This made the colonists see them not as people, but as some sort of animal. Arthur put up small proclamation signs around Tasmania in 1813 to show that everyone was equal to the law, which is quite horrifying as the Black Line also occurred this year.
2,000 civilians, 500 troops would march in the so-called Black Line. They'd carry 30,000 rounds of ammunition and 300 handcuffs. Governor Arthur took personal command and planned the campaign in detail. Arthur wrote to London, "We now move forward in full hopes of success." They captured one old man and a boy.
In 1832, the conflict would finally end when the British persuaded the natives to surrender, with only an estimated 230 Aboriginals left, meaning the genocide wiped out thousands of Tasmanians. The remaining Aboriginals went to Flinders Island, also known as Warbinella, meaning Black Man's House. The rest died later on from diseases, and in 1876, Truganini was the last native to die. The international community did not care about this, and as stated earlier, the king encouraged them to wipe them out. The British would receive no punishment for their crimes, as they only lost 201 men from the fighting. The land of Tasmania would drastically change, as no Aboriginals were left, and the British started to settle in there and created farms and civilization. To conclude, the Tasmanian genocide would go on to be a devastating disaster that would wipe out the native people of Tasmania.